So, a week from today is Ash Wednesday, in which we are reminded of how our intentions, our relationships, even life itself, are prone to disintegration. Things fall apart, and many things, in fact, are already broken. The whole season of Lent bears witness to human fallibility and to just the finite nature of this world. We affirm these things, not because we're trying for a downer here, but because they are a reality to be reckoned with. And to not reckon with them would be just to give them free rein beneath the surface. We affirm these things, matters of human sin, brokenness, and mortality, but also we rarely go into the details. In the same way, if we don't confront them in general, we don't deal with them. But if we don't confront them in particular, they can be especially insidious. So we affirm sinfulness as a doctrine, but what do we look at ourselves in the mirror? So we can say all of us have a slanted view of the world, all of us can be a little distorted, but what about you is slanted, and where are you slanting? All of us have sinned, but what is the harm maybe that you've done to others, to God, to even yourself that needs amending? All of us need to be saved. Indeed, but for you, from what is it that you need saving? What are the particular corruptions, patterns, and illusions that pull you away from the life for which God calls you, for which God created us, all of us? What robs us of peace? What robs you of serenity? And what compels you to rob it from others? We read in the Gospels how after his baptism, in which Jesus hears the voice of God proclaim, "This is my beloved Son with whom I am well pleased." After that, though, there's another voice that haunts Jesus. It is the voice that takes this promise and attempts to chip away at it, that attempts to make it conditional. When Jesus goes into the wilderness, into that quiet place, where the only voices that you hear are the ones that you bring with you, Jesus can hear and confront that voice that haunts him, that challenges God's love. Because while God has told Jesus, "You are my beloved Son," this voice that suddenly becomes a little more audible in the wilderness, even though it was probably always there, chips away at that belovedness, again, with these conditionals. If you are the Son of God, if you are the Son of God, if you are the Son of God, there must be some burden you must carry in order to prove it, to validate that love. It tries to turn love from a promise and a reality into something less certain, something that we somehow have to manifest on our own. It's hard to watch Jesus struggle with that voice, and it's hard for us to struggle with it. To watch Jesus be tempted to seek validation outside of the unconditional love of God, to act like that love is something that needs proving. But isn't that something we do all the time? Like, just that nagging feeling that God's final word, that you are a beloved child, just never seems to cut mustard for us, and so we seek other avenues of comfort and validation. And for Jesus, that voice is there, whether he acknowledges it or not, but in the wilderness, he can acknowledge it as it pulls at and chips away at Jesus' identity, purpose, and peace. In the wilderness, in a place apart from the distractions and the noise, that voice can be heard a little more clearly. It can be brought into the open, confronted, and resolved. It can be dealt with in the spaces of solitude and prayer rather than left to fester and erupt, to allow it to pull strings and push buttons during times of stress and trial. Because Jesus has been present to the particular things that nag at his soul, they won't be there underneath the surface, provoking something that is less than gracious, less than peaceful, because he knows that it's there. He won't be left to wonder, well, why am I reacting this way or feeling this way when he faces the adversity and rejection that await him. That same nagging, skeptical voice will be with him throughout his whole life, even to the very end, in his darkest moment upon the cross, where voices cry out to him, if you are the Son of God, come down from there. Prove that you are God's beloved. But because Jesus has done the work, not because he allows those quiet places to acknowledge the reality of his heart and soul, the light and the dark, so that he may be able to acknowledge and confront and deal with it and know that that is something that goes with him, that he carries. By confronting the things that try to define him outside of the amazing and unconditional love of God, he becomes somebody who does not need comfort or affirmation outside of God's grace. He's not somebody whose buttons are being pushed and strings pulled by unacknowledged and invisible emotional, psychological, and spiritual forces. And so as we face these 40 days, how can we find our own quiet places to confront the voices that attempt to give us meaning, identity, and worth outside of God, that chip away at our sense of value as God's beloved children? What are the voices that seek to make who we are and what we are worth something conditional, something that's always out of reach? What is it that robs us of the peace of simply resting in the love of God and the promise of God's faithfulness? What robs us of that peace that allows us to then go and in turn love others as God has loved us through Jesus Christ, as those with nothing to prove? May you and I discover these answers, not for shame, not for rolling in the ditch of something, not to punish yourself, but simply so that we may know what is happening in my heart and mind and in your heart and mind. That those voices that whisper something less than God's unconditional love may be acknowledged, confronted, and just allow them to pass along, to know that they are always there looking to pull the levers on us. That we may confront them, but then allow more so to allow the voice of God to speak to you anew, that you may know in the deepest parts of your being that you are a beloved child of God. Amen.